sorry to say that your mass media, the Western mass media, always beside the Israelis. Your baby in this area.
In the echoing silence and biased ink of media corridors, the Israel-Palestine narrative unfolds on the front pages of Western media, where truth becomes a casualty and the struggle for justice is buried beneath layers of distortion. In a 2010 study conducted at the University of Pittsburgh, researchers analyzed 91 articles from the New York Times covering of Operation Cast Lead, the 3-week Israeli military assault on the Gaza Strip from December 27, 2008 to January 18, 2009. This operation led to the tragic deaths of nearly 1,400 Palestinians and 13 Israelis. The findings revealed a significant media bias in the New York Times coverage, with a disproportionate emphasis on Israeli casualties. Despite Palestinians experiencing a death rate 106 times higher than Israelis, the newspaper's coverage highlighted Israeli deaths by 431% compared to a mere 17% for Palestinian deaths, creating a stark ratio of 25:1. Notably, only 3% of Palestinian fatalities received coverage in headlines and initial paragraphs. Fast forward to 2023, such media biases persist in molding narratives sculpted by half and selective truths. The reporting by prominent Western media outlets ever since October 7th has come under scrutiny for deploying language and discourse that appears to contribute to the systemic dehumanization of Palestinian people. Allegations of racial hegemony and vested interest suggest a deliberate obfuscation of the complete truth, with the media potentially implicated in the calculated manufacturing of societal consent for a genocide. Biased and partial media coverage reeks of the attempted justification for the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, double standards, fallacious reasoning, and factual inaccuracies. Arab, Muslim, and Palestinian perspectives are systematically marginalized and delegitimized, characterized as unreliable, with the added detriment of inflammatory language reinforcing Islamophobic sentiments and perpetuating racist tropes. Moreover, the dissemination of misinformation by Israeli officials finds a platform, while the indiscriminate and inhumane killings of innocent civilians in Gaza doesn't. Well, not until Hamas is condemned first. Despite a multitude of Western journalists covering the conflict from Israel, there is a noticeable scarcity of on-the-ground reporting on the unfolding humanitarian disaster in Gaza. The world is confined to a singular narrative, offering only one perspective on the situation. It is quite significant to note that the Western press did not mention that the Gaza hospital attack, which killed 500 people, was carried out by Israel, thus creating a narrative that obfuscated responsibility and suppressed the fact. No mainstream media outlet has held Israel accountable for its actions. Even when accountability was eventually acknowledged, it transpired after a considerable 40-day delay, perhaps because the graphic nature of the images emerging from Gaza made any justification challenging. In contrast, an immediate condemnation and prominent coverage were accorded to the Hamas attack, featuring prominently in American and British media front pages.
Overnight, the most horrific news imaginable. The Israeli Defense Force discovered the bodies of 40 babies and young children. They'd been killed, some even beheaded. Babies found dead next to their cots. The shocking sight. Sympathetic with Hamas's cause, and do you think that's in part why you've been able to negotiate the release of Thai citizens? Just to be clear, you're not denying that Hamas killed Israeli civilians, are you? Hamas did kill at least 39 Thai citizens. Is this just all part of a deal that's been done with Hamas? They release Thai citizens and the hostages have to all say they were treated well. You said early on that the Thai hostages were being looked after. Why were you so confident that was the case?
Every minute that passes, the situation just gets worse and worse. There is no words to describe what's happening. There is no connection to God.
And the smoke that you smell, that you breathe, is the smoke of burning your homes.
Hi from Nusrat refugee camp in the middle area. It's the first day of closing the fire, not ceasing fire. It's the first day.
الأسرى العاديين ما حدا بيشفع لحدا ما حدا بورك لحدا صاروا مسكر علينا قطف علينا الكهرباء جميع كنا نموت برد في لما اجت الشتوية رشونا بالفلفل وهربوا وخلونا نموت هناك.
It is also worthy to know that the Israeli hostages are personified and humanized as they receive personal attention and empathy in media coverage, sharing their testimonies, reunion stories, and providing glimpses into their lives before captivity. Conversely, there is a notable absence of a similar coverage for Palestinian captives released from occupation jails, many of whom are children as the youngest. Reports on these Palestinian abductees primarily focus on justification for their wrongful detention, failing to question why Israel is holding children as prisoners in the first place when it violates international law. Media's tendency to marginalize Palestinians aims at minimizing their suffering by rendering them as practically invisible. This method strategically works to desensitize the world to their predicament by eliminating any visible traces of it. This strategy entails a role reversal, depicting victims such as Palestinians as subhuman, aggressive terrorists, and Israel as the victim with the illegitimate right to defend itself. By mobilizing fabrication, misinterpretation, slant, and linguistic determinism, the media crafts a narrative that suggests Israel is compelled to resort to bombing the besieged Gaza Strip due to being placed in a difficult position. However, the reality is that it is the prolonged and inhumane treatment of Palestinians by Israelis over the past 75 years that leaves Palestinians with little choice but to resist. Reporting standards dictate the use of active voice to convey a story clearly, yet the utilization of passive language introduces ambiguity in the minds of readers and viewers, obscuring the identity of the actor and diminishing the gravity of Palestinian suffering. For example, the headline of the Washington Post, "Premature Babies Found Dead Decomposing in Gaza's Al-Nasr Hospital," creates a perception for the reader that they died not because of Israel's total blockade on Gaza, but for some other, perhaps natural causes. Hundreds of media outlets report killings of Palestinians in passive voice as died, found dead, and feared dead to cloak the aggressor and actor. However, when it comes to Israeli deaths, they don't hesitate for making the perpetrator known and ensuring he is condemned. The power of language is evident in the subtle manipulations seen in media coverage where terms like illegal settlements changed into neighborhoods, Israeli settlers are civilians, and Israeli Defense Forces' brutality against Palestinian worshippers are euphemized as tensions and clashes. The West Bank is framed as contested rather than occupied, showcasing a linguistic strategy aligning with Israeli narratives to legitimize the occupation. The media's failure to critically examine Israeli actions, coupled with the use of inflammatory language, contributes to the continuous oppression and war crimes against the Palestinian civilians. In context of the Russia-Ukrainian war, the same media outlets flips the narratives, hailing Ukrainians defending themselves by throwing Molotov cocktails as brave heroes, while calling Palestinians defending their homeland as terrorists and stone pelters. The decades-long strangulation and siege of Gaza, the denial of basic human rights to Palestinians, subjugation to inhumane treatment, forced displacement and the overarching impact of racial supremacy are marginalized or omitted. This narrative omission contributes to the institutional distortion of the facts, influencing global perceptions.
Will you now take the opportunity to condemn what Hamas did on October the 7th? I only ask you one more time. I'm simply asking you, do you unreservedly condemn the slaughter of 260 innocent people?
I condemn any
You can condemn the terror attacks.
Yes.
I find that less worthy of respect.
But you see,
Even when Palestinians are given airtime to share their stories, the narrative is divorced from the broader context, sidestepping uncomfortable truths of the underlying issues of occupation, ethnic cleansing, and settler colonialism. The deliberate framing of Israel's aggression as a response to Hamas, rather than acknowledging decades of occupation, apartheid, and brutalization, validates the notion that Palestinians are complicit in their own plight. The media consistently exacerbates Palestinian reaction while downplaying Israeli actions. Media starts the clock as soon as any form of resistance by Palestinians emerges, simplifying Hamas as the exclusive antagonist, overlooking the broader and immediate socio-political context. Upon resolution, such as instances when Israel ceases its bombardment of Gaza, the media halts the clock, focusing elsewhere. This deliberate construction of a timeline begins with Palestinian instigation and provocation and ends with Israeli retaliation and reprisal. The myriad of factors that led to the resistance or the events of 7th October, the very root cause of the problem, illegal occupation and settler colonialism, are grossly overlooked. If that context was provided to the readers and viewers, it would blatantly sway the public opinion in favor of Palestine. Newsrooms are receiving serious backlash and revulsion on biased reporting as they fail to tell the simple truth. Resistance is not the problem, occupation is. At this point, it is imperative for the consumers to be mindful of their consumption of information from varied sources. Manipulative content aimed at accelerating polarization, promoting hate speech, and inciting violence should be minutely scrutinized in order to foster a healthy information space across platforms. Quick ways to prevent yourself from amplifying and consuming fake news are to use fact-checking websites such as FactCheck, Snopes.com, Photo Forensics, etc. in order to verify news reports. Make sure your news feeds cover information from diverse viewpoints and is not just limited to a particular ideology. Be aware of the 5 filters that Noam Chomsky talks about in his work Manufactured Consent. These are advertising, ownership, sourcing, fleck, and fear and marginalizing dissent while consuming controversial news pieces. Media has given away Israeli government a free pass, enabling it to continue ethnically cleansing the Palestinian people with impunity and immunity. The pro-Israel biases of the Western media are considered to be reflective of the wider political association of Israel with Western government and are thus endemic. While it's impossible to calculate the effects of these alleged biases, critics argue that they wittingly or unwittingly aid Israel in getting away with crimes that are not even recognized as crimes to begin with. The ulterior motive of these tactics by the untruthful media is as plain as daylight: help sustain the occupation. Newsrooms bear the moral and ethical responsibility to report the truth as it is. The dire consequences of such biased reporting, other than the facts mentioned, has culminated into mass incidents of hate crimes. For example, the murder of a 3-year-old child in Illinois, USA, and the shooting of 3 Palestinian students for wearing a keffiyeh in Vermont, USA. It is imperative for media outlets to acknowledge the impact of their actions. They ought to actively recruit Palestinian journalists and amplify Palestinian voices rather than perpetually excluding them from the narratives. The wealth of documented violence against Palestinians, often relegated to social media feeds subjected to distinct form of censorship, should not be confined but deserves broader visibility and attention.
I have to ask those who used to speak about human rights. Where is this human rights there in this house? Did you see the picture there? Our camps, Lebanese villages who had been smashed completely. Civilian war, yes? Because it is your baby who did it. It is Israel who did it.